The dollar's share of global reserves just hit a 30-year low. If that doesn't make you stop and pay attention, I don't know what will, because this is not some temporary dip. This is a clear warning signal that the rest of the world has lost confidence in the dollar. But central banks aren't waiting around to find out what happens when the dollar collapses, like many people I know. No, they are moving away from the dollar and into gold as quickly as possible. Because when the dollar collapses, anyone who holds dollar-denominated assets will be left with nothing. But before we get into all of that, how this is going to impact your financial future, let's first start with what exactly is going on today. From Wolf Street, the share of USD denominated foreign exchange reserves fell to 57.4% of total exchange reserves, the lowest since 1994, according to the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. But this is huge because having the global reserve currency be the dollar has given the United States, and by proxy its citizens, an exorbitant privilege. It's allowed us to borrow cheaply, print more cash without immediate consequence, and maintain economic dominance. If you've ever wondered to yourself, how is it possible that we can print so many dollars and yet we haven't entered hyperinflation yet? This is the reason why. The fact that we have the global reserve currency, it has provided a safety net. But as more countries stop using the dollar and get rid of their dollar reserves, well, that safety net is disappearing. It is a vicious cycle we're in that unfortunately has no signs of stopping. As countries continue to move away from the dollar, when we print more dollars, it further weakens the dollar, meaning inflation will continue to rise, leading us to hyperinflation and ultimately resulting in a currency reset. Now, I cannot stress this enough, but anyone who has anything inside of the dollar system, so your savings, your retirement, 401k, those would all be essentially worthless as the dollar collapses and they revalue or devalue the currency at next to nothing. But how close are we? Well, in Q1 2015, the US dollar share was still 66%. Over these 10 years, the dollar share of global reserve currency has dropped by 8.6 percentage points. If this pace of decline continues, the dollar share will fall below 50%. But that's only if nothing changes. The 10-year timeline, which is important because once we drop below 50%, well, then we're far less dominant. We're less than half of total reserves when we used to be close to 100. But the 10-year timeline assumes that nothing changes. It assumes that the BRICS coalition isn't going to make any progress on their mission of de-dollarization as they have continued to reduce reliance on the dollar. I think that's highly unlikely given technological advancements, their use of CBDCs, and their progress over the last few years. It also assumes that the United States is going to stop spending. But if I were a betting woman, I don't think that they're going to pull the plug on that printing press anytime soon, which means that more than likely we are going to drop below that 50% threshold much sooner than 10 years. So let's take a look at this. Should the United States continue to recklessly overspend, and we see this timeline advance rapidly, we could look at the 1970s as an example. So here's a chart that shows the US dollar percent share of global reserve currencies annual since 1965. Now, if you look at the 70s, after President Nixon delinked the dollar from gold, what happened? Well, the United States experienced extreme inflation. And during that period of time, you can see that the percentage share of global reserve currency significantly dropped. Now, it dropped by about 30%. We would not survive today if the US dollar dropped by 30%. But if we continue to spend the way that we have been, this is a very real possibility. And this happened in the span of only 2 or 3 years. But it gets even worse. I know someone out there is wondering, okay, how is the dollar dropping when it seems that the dollar index is up, that the dollar is strong? But in fact, that actually means that we're worse off than what these charts are saying, because rates have been higher than other countries. Maybe other countries' currencies have been dropping in value compared to the dollar, all of which give the illusion of a strong dollar, but it's temporary. All it takes is one of those factors to change, and suddenly we have a significantly weaker dollar, meaning countries are going to have even less confidence than they do today in the dollar. But I also want to get in front of what I know someone has probably already commented out there, which is stop spreading fear. The dollar is still above 50%. There is no other currency that can take the dollar's place as the global reserve currency, so it will always be the way it is. And you know what? You're partially right. There isn't another currency that can take the place of the dollar as it stands today. Absolutely. Because of the dollar's liquidity, ease of use, the US economy, and because global oil trade is primarily priced in dollars still, thanks to the petrodollar agreement. These are all reasons that King Dollar has remained so. But to stick your head in the sand and claim that it will always be this way just because it has been this way, well, that is just ignorant, because the warning signs are here and the future might not look the way the past did. Maybe today there's not another country's currency that can dethrone the dollar, but maybe it's a basket of currencies. Maybe it's a new CBDC. Maybe it's something you haven't thought of, because all we can prove today, looking at the facts, is that the dollar is declining. But just for argument's sake, because this is a valid question for someone who's new to all of this, someone might be wondering, okay, I see the dollar is in decline, but it doesn't make sense. Why would any country want to move away from the dollar if they hold dollar reserves? Wouldn't a weak dollar not benefit them? Wouldn't it only hurt them themselves? And again, yes, partially you're right. That is the case. No one wants the dollar to crash tomorrow. It would be devastating for countries across the world. But this is not an overnight event. This is a process that has been in progress for years that is now just rapidly advancing, especially over the last few years and looking at the next couple of years. This dollar decline is advancing, and it makes sense. If you think about it, the weaponization of the dollar, sanctions against countries, seizing and freezing assets, blacklisting countries who don't agree with the United States, regardless of how you feel about the US's policy making and all their decisions when it comes to that. If you're another country and you've been on the receiving end of the weaponization of the dollar, or you feel like you've gotten the short stick when it comes to a seat at the table on the global economy because the dollar has had so many privileges and therefore the United States has so many privileges, it might be worth a small sacrifice now and a shift in your resources to ultimately set yourself up for far greater success in the future. So we're all on the same page, but the question still remains. If central banks are moving away from the dollar and there's no viable currency alternative, then what are they protecting their wealth with? Well, according to the IMF, central banks' gold holdings have surged over this decade to 1.16 billion troy ounces. We are talking trillions and trillions of dollars here. Now, this is a trend that started right after 2008. We have seen a steady increase in central banks' gold holdings. Why is this? Well, because of course, in 2008, we saw how easy it is for the printing press to work on overdrive, meaning how easy it is for one single event to potentially take down the entire global economy, and how easy it is for a government like the United States to just print. And what happens when they print like that? Well, everyone else out there who's sitting there with their USD reserves, those reserves are suddenly worth less because the dollar is worth less. They don't want to be in that situation anymore. So what do? They turn to the ultimate safe haven asset, gold. Gold, because it cannot be weaponized against you and it cannot be inflated away. I always say, don't listen to what they're telling us, watch what they're doing. And if we look at central banks and those in power, those who are elite and wealthy already, what are they doing? They are protecting themselves. They are moving their wealth into a safe store of value. Now, we can only assume what's coming next, a crisis, a collapse, again, hyperinflation leading into a currency reset. I cannot tell you exactly when that's going to happen, but this situation to be honest, reminds me of the frog in boiling water. I'm sure you've heard that one before. You put a frog into a pot of boiling water and it jumps out because immediately it knows there's danger. If you put a frog into a pot of cold water and turn on the heat, well, unfortunately, the frog does not realize that the water's boiling until it's too late. We, the American people, are the frog in the pot of water, and the heat being turned up is de-dollarization. It is the collapse of the dollar as represented by the declining amount of foreign reserves that are in the dollar, the declining use of the dollar in foreign trade, and all of these threats that we see every single day. But too many people are stuck in the past saying it will never change, nothing will ever happen until one day it happens. And when that day comes, it will be too late. So again, for me, when I look at all this, don't listen to what they tell you, look at what they're doing. They are protecting themselves with physical gold outside of the system, outside of the dollar, so that when that event happens, they are ready, they are prepared, and most importantly, their wealth is protected. They have set themselves up for opportunity on the other side. The same way that they have done that, we can do that too. We can take our power back. If you want to learn more how to get a strategy in place for exactly this situation, how to prepare and protect your wealth, that is what we are here for. Find out how we can help you by calling us at the number below or click the Calendly link in the description. We are stronger together. And as always, I so appreciate you being here. I'm Taylor Kenny with ITM Trading, your trusted source for all things gold, silver, and lifelong wealth protection. Until next time.